Okay, welcome everyone. Now that we've got the computer glitches sorted out. Um, the Buddha, he taught for 45 years, and originally the teachings were passed down orally, but then when script became available, they were eventually written down. And all of these writings that encompass his 45 years of teaching, they're in a collection called the Pali Canon. And the Pali Canon is sort of divided into five sections. So all of his sort of really long teachings were put into the Digha Nikaya, which just means the long discourses. His sort of medium length teachings were collected into the Majjhima Nikaya, which means middle length sayings. A whole bunch of his shorter teachings, sometimes, like if you look at, they're only a half a page or a page. They were arranged thematically in what's called the Samyutta Nikaya, or the linked sayings. And then all of his teachings that involved numbers, like where he'd say, this is the one thing you really need to know, or these are the four noble truths, or this is the noble eightfold path. So he had lists that went from number one up to number 11. And so these were these sort of sayings or teachings that involved numbers were collected into what's called the Anguttara Nikaya, or the numbered sayings. Then everything else was in sort of a miscellaneous collection called the Khuddaka Nikaya. And it has some very important teachings, like the Metta Sutta, the Sutta on loving friendliness. That's in the Khuddaka Nikaya. The very famous Dhammapada, which are a collection of verses that the Buddha spoke, that's in the Khuddaka Nikaya. The poems by the senior monks and nuns from the time of the Buddha, many of whom were enlightened, their poems called the Therigatha and the Theragatha, they're collected into this last sort of miscellaneous group. So even though it's sort of a miscellaneous group, it's not unimportant. It contains a lot of very well-known teachings. So I have decided over this next year to share with you some of the teachings of the Buddha from the Anguttara Nikaya, the numbered sayings. And Bodhipala came up with a cute name for this called Count on the Buddha, because you're counting from 1 to 11. So I have chosen for tonight to take some of the teachings from the Anguttara Nikaya on morality. And morality is a very, very important foundation for our whole spiritual practice in Buddhism. So morality is basically non-harm to self and others. And it's a real underpinning. If you get upset and you say something in an angry way to a friend or a family member, and then you try and sit down and meditate, you can't focus on your meditation object because your mind is just, focusing on your anger or focusing on regret for having, beaked off with some nasty words or whatever to somebody that you love. So anyway, it's just so important for our meditation practice. So the first teaching that I'm going to share with you is from the Book of Twos, chapter 11. And this is the Buddha speaking. There are, meditators, these two powers. What two? The power of reflection and the power of development. And what, meditators, is the power of reflection? It's when someone reflects. Bad conduct of body, speech, or mind has a bad, painful result in both this life and the next. Reflecting like this, they give up bad conduct by way of body, speech, and mind, and develop good conduct by way of body, speech, and mind. keeping themselves pure. This is called the power of reflection. Because I'm focusing on morality tonight, I'm not going to go into the second part of this, the development part. We'll leave that for another time. So here, the Buddha is sort of talking about a lower level of morality. I think there's several stages that developmental psychologists have defined for the development of morality, but a lower level is you don't do something bad because you're afraid that there'll be a consequence for you, that something, you'll go to jail or lose a friendship or lose your job or, there's going to be some painful consequence to you. A higher level of morality is, um, you care about other people and you want to act with kindness and generosity and compassion. And so you're not going to harm others with your speech or your actions or your thinking, just because you don't want to be treated that way and you understand other people don't want to be treated harmfully. And so that's sort of a higher level. But here in this particular thing, he's sort of reflecting on a lower level of morality. And then the next four verses in this chapter 2 of the Anguttara Nikaya are basically saying the same thing. But then the next one, chapter 16, there's a little bit of a twist. So I'll read that one to you. So a certain Brahmin went up to the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to the Buddha, "What is the cause, worthy Gautama?" Gautama was the family name of the Buddha. "What is the cause, worthy Gautama? What is the reason why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell?" And the Buddha answers, "Unprincipled and immoral conduct is the reason why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell." What is the cause, worthy Gautama? What is the reason why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm? Principled and moral conduct is the reason why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. And then the Brahmin answers in a sort of a stock way that you'll hear many, many times in the Pali Canon when the Buddha gives the teaching that the person asking him the question is, they really feel good about that, then they give this sort of reply. "Excellent, worthy Gautama, excellent," as if he was righting the overturned or revealing the hidden or pointing out the path to the lost or lighting a lamp in the dark so people with clear eyes can see what's there. Worthy Gautama has made the teaching clear in many ways. I go for refuge to the worthy Gautama, to the teaching, and to the monastic Sangha. From this day forth, may the worthy Gautama remember me as a lay follower who has gone for refuge for life. So in this teaching, the Buddha is introducing the concept of karma. So karma, that's the Pali word. The Sanskrit word is karma. So maybe more people have heard the word with the R in it. So it's just the exact same word, only one's in the Pali and one's in Sanskrit. And so karma refers to intentional action. Um, and we have the same thing in our legal system. If you intentionally kill someone, that's called murder. But if you accidentally, like maybe you're in a fight and you're not intending to kill them, but they die, then it's called manslaughter. They've got a difference there. So Karma refers to intentional action. Now, but you have to be careful because sometimes you may do some things that have a negative consequence, and you think, well, I wasn't intending that, but it's a habitual action. So a lot of our habitual actions, they're still considered intentional because at one point they just became habit energy. So you're not off the hook if it's a, sort of a habitual kind of action, but it was originally, there was intention behind that. So in the Buddhist philosophy, if you do some kind of an intentional action, as the Buddha said in this teaching, if it's a good intention, then the consequences are good. You have good consequences perhaps in this lifetime or in other lifetimes. On the other hand, if your intentional action is negative, then there's going to be negative consequences. So the consequences are called vipaka. So karma refers to your intention, and then the outcome is called vipaka. And don't try and walk around and sort of look at people who are having maybe a rough time in life and then be shaking your finger at them and saying, oh, they've done, some bad karma, they've had some bad intentions. Um, the Buddha said karma is extremely complex. Um, and he said, if you try and figure it out, your head will split into seven different pieces. So we never want to look at this simplistically. Um, but from our own sort of personal point of view, we definitely want to be having positive intentions for how we speak, how we act, and what we're thinking in our minds. Okay, the next teaching, number 17. So another Brahmin is asking the Buddha a question. Then the Brahmin Janusoni went up to the Buddha and exchanged greetings with him. When the greetings and polite conversation were over, he sat down to one side and said to the Buddha, what is the cause, worthy Gotama? What is the reason why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell? And then the Buddha replies, what they've done and what they've not done. That's why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. But what is the cause, worthy Gotama? What is the reason why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm? And the Buddha replies, what they've done and what they've not done. That's why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. So the Brahmin doesn't quite get it. So he says, I don't understand the meaning of what the worthy Gotama has said in brief without explaining the details. Worthy Gotama, please teach me this matter in detail so I can understand the meaning. Well then, Brahman, listen and apply your mind well. I will speak. Yes, worthy sir, Janusoni replied. And the Buddha said this, firstly, Brahman, someone has done bad things and not done good things by way of body, speech, and mind. So what they've done and what they've not done is why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. Furthermore, Brahman, someone has done good things and not done bad things by way of body, speech, and mind. So what they've done and what they've not done is why some sentient beings, when their body breaks up after death, are reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. Excellent, worthy Gotama. And he says the same thing that the other Brahmin said. From this day forth, may the worthy Gotama remember me as a lay follower who has gone for refuge for life. So, what the Buddha is bringing out into light here is that morality is not just not doing the bad things, it's also doing good things. It's being kind, it's being compassionate, it's being generous. So, you don't get away with just avoiding unskillful things. There's more to it than that. The next teaching, number 18, it references another very famous teaching that's found in the Middle Length Sayings, the Majjhima Nikaya, number 20. So, Majjhima Nikaya, the 20, the Buddha gives 5 ways to stop thinking. So, very important for us in our meditation practice to know this sutta, this teaching, because whenever we sit down to meditate, often our brain gets hijacked into thoughts. And the second method that he gives in that Majjhima Nikaya 20, the second method of stopping thinking is by looking at the drawbacks. What are the drawbacks of thinking this particular thought? Anyway, so back here to the Anguttara Nikaya, chapter 2, number 18, there's a similar teaching. Then Venerable Ananda went up to the Buddha, bowed, and sat down to one side. The Buddha said to him, Ananda, I absolutely say that you should not do bad things by way of body, speech, and mind. But, sir, if someone does these things that should not be done, what drawbacks should they expect? They should expect these drawbacks. They blame themselves. So remember when I was talking about if you get angry and say something unkind to someone, and then you try and sit down to meditate, then your mind's going to be sort of rolling that over, and you're going to be feeling bad about having lost it and said something hurtful. So this is the first drawback. Your conscience is going to be pricked. And the Buddha continues, after examination, sensible people criticize them. They get a bad reputation. They feel lost when they die. And when their body breaks up after death, they are reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. These are the drawbacks they should expect. Ananda, I absolutely say that you should do good things by way of body, speech, and mind. But, sir, if someone does these things that should be done, what benefits should they expect? They should expect these benefits. They don't blame themselves. After examination, sensible people praise them. They get a good reputation. They don't feel lost when they die. And when the body breaks up after death, they are reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. These are the benefits they should expect. Now I'm going to jump here from the Anguttara Nikaya to the Majjhima Nikaya, the Middle Length Sayings, chapter 60, because it's connected with these teachings. So I want to share it as well. And it's interesting, chapter 60 is the chapter on householders. So if you ever had the impression that the Buddha was mostly speaking to monastics, that's not true. He gives many, many teachings to us householders. So this is one of them. The English name for this chapter is unfailing. So the Buddha was wandering about northeast India, and he arrived at a village of the Kosalan Brahmins called Sala. And then the locals heard that the Buddha was in town, and they knew about his reputation. So I'm just going to read you what they said about his reputation. And this is reflected in the chant that we started tonight with. It was talking about the reputation of the Buddha and then the Dhamma and the Sangha. So here's the Buddha's reputation. The Blessed One is perfected, a fully awakened Buddha, accomplished in knowledge and conduct, holy, knower of the world, supreme guide for those fit for training, teacher of gods and humans, awakened, blessed. He has realized with his own insight this world with its gods, maras, and divinities, this population with its ascetics and Brahmins, gods and humans, and he makes it known to others. He proclaims a teaching that is good in the beginning, good in the middle, and good in the end, meaningful and well phrased. And he reveals a spiritual practice that's entirely full and pure. It's good to see such perfected ones. Then the Brahmins and householders of Sala went up to the Buddha. Before sitting down to one side, some bowed. Some exchanged greetings and polite conversation. Some held up their joined palms towards the Buddha. Some announced their name and clan, while some kept quiet. Now, I just want to comment on this paragraph here. I think it's a very encouraging paragraph. Like the Buddha wasn't demanding that people act a certain way to him. So some people who were very familiar with his teachings and felt a lot of gratitude when they came into his presence, they really wanted to show respect and they would bow to him. And then you had all different gradations of that, from just people putting their palms together in Anjali or just introducing themselves. And then maybe those people who didn't know anything about the Buddha or his teachings or anything, they just stood quietly at the side. So what this is saying to you, that you don't have to feel uncomfortable if you go, you come into a monastery, or go to a different monastery. Like if you don't know, like what are the usual rituals or, what do people usually do? Don't worry about it. You know, do what's comfortable for you, and you can just quietly stand to the side and just watch to see what's going on. It's like when we start our meetings here, some of us bow. We look at the Buddha Rupa to see the peacefulness of that, to remind us of, the peacefulness of our practice. And we do 3 bows to the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, but it's not absolutely not required. If you're comfortable doing that and you want to do that, beautiful. If you're not, you just sit there quietly. So hopefully you can take courage from this to just feel very comfortable when you're visiting someplace and not sure what the protocols are. So anyway, all these people have come up and greeted the Buddha in various ways, and the Buddha said to them, "So, householders, is there any teacher you're happy with in whom you have acquired grounded faith?" And surprisingly, the answer was no. They hadn't met a teacher that they were feeling really grounded with. So the Buddha goes on, since you haven't found a teacher you're happy with, you should undertake and implement this unfailing teaching. For when the unfailing teaching is undertaken, it will be for your lasting welfare and happiness. And what is this unfailing teaching? So first of all, he's talking about what it isn't. There are some ascetics and Brahmins who have this doctrine in view, that there's no meaning in giving, sacrifice, or offerings. There's no fruit or result of good and bad deeds. There's no afterlife. So this was a teaching by a teacher that was around at the time of the Buddha. His name was Ajita of the hair blanket. So he's basically teaching there's no consequence to your intentional actions. That's his basic teaching. And then the Buddha goes on to say, and there are some ascetics and Brahmins whose doctrine directly contradicts this. They say there is meaning in giving, in sacrifice, in offerings. There are fruits and results of good and bad deeds. There is an afterlife. And so, of course, this is the teaching of the Buddha. And his teaching involves this idea of karma. So he asks, what do you think, householders? Don't these doctrines directly contradict each other? They answer, yes, sir. Since this is so, consider those ascetics and Brahmins whose view is that there's no meaning in giving, etc. You can expect that they will shun good conduct by way of body, speech, and mind, and undertake and implement bad conduct by way of body, speech, and mind. Why is that? Because those ascetics and Brahmins don't see that unskillful qualities are full of drawbacks, sordidness, and corruption, or that skillful qualities have the benefit and cleansing power of renunciation. So again, these are people with that lower level of moral development. They're not going to act morally because there, could be a consequence, not because they have that higher level of wanting to act with kindness and compassion. Moreover, since there actually is another world, their view that there is no other world is wrong view. Since there actually is another world, in persuading another that there is no other world, they are persuading them to accept an untrue teaching. And so, on account of that, they glorify themselves and put others down. So they give up their former ethical conduct and are established in unethical conduct. Yeah, because they don't feel there's any consequence. They're not believing in karma. They don't think anything bad's going to happen to them. So what the heck? They just carry on in a negative way. And that is how these many bad, unskillful qualities come to be with wrong view as condition, persuading others to accept untrue teachings and glorifying oneself and putting others down. And then, if there is another world, when their body breaks up after death, they will be reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. But let us grant that those who say there is no other world, let's say they're correct. Then, regardless, that individual is still criticized by sensible people in this very life as being an immoral individual of wrong view, a nihilist. But if there really is another world, they hold a losing hand on both counts, for they are criticized by sensible people in this very life, and when their body breaks up after death, they will be reborn in a place of loss, a bad place, the underworld, hell. A sensible person reflects on the matter in this way. If there is another world, when this individual body breaks up after death, if they act in a moral way, they will be reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. But let us grant that those who say that there is no other world are correct. Regardless, that individual is still praised by sensible people in this very life as being a moral individual of right view who affirms a positive teaching. So if there really is another world, they hold a perfect hand on both counts, for they are praised by sensible people in this very life, and when their body breaks up after death, they will be reborn in a good place, a heavenly realm. They have rightly undertaken this unfailing teaching in such a way that it encompasses the positive outcomes of both sides, leaving out the unskillful premise. So what's interesting is um, the Buddha is saying, like, you can't lose. Like, if you act in a good way, even if there isn't an afterlife, you're going to have good consequences. People are going to look at you kindly in this life. But then if there is another world, then you're going to get a good consequence there. Whereas those who don't believe in another world, not only are they're criticized in this life for their behavior, but if there happens to be another world, then they're going to get a negative outcome in that world. So many years later, in the 1600s, there was a mathematician and philosopher called Pascal. And so he developed this same argument that the Buddha had developed 2,600 years ago, um, sort of saying why it's a good thing to do, to have certain beliefs or act in a certain way because of these winning with both hands. Okay, that's what I wanted to share with you tonight on the Buddha's words on morality.